You've wandered into Snarky Faith, the place where American Christianity gets skewered, roasted, and served cold. Faith on the fringe, naming what's broken, keeping what matters. Strap in. This is Snarky Faith.
Previously on Snarky Faith.
And that's why when we talk about climate change, I don't get upset about it. I don't get worked up about it, is because my faith is not in climate change. It's not in scientists dictating what we should and should not do to save the environment, because my faith is in Jesus Christ, right? He's the same today, tomorrow, and forever, yesterday. And so, if you've read the good book, you know how it ends. It's not with climate change. And that's my closing speech.
Well, my faith is in Jesus. My faith is in Jesus, so fuck the environment, fuck the earth. We don't care about God's creation. No, we don't. No, we don't at all. Welcome back again to Snarky Faith. I'm your host, Stuart. I mean, gosh, if she had only read the Tribulation Survival Guide, right? The only guide that will get you through the tribulation. This is satire with soul for anybody out there that grew up fearing the rapture was going to happen, grew up with our satanic panic, grew up in all of that evangelical crap. Crap that we were handed as kids that created anxiety and terror in us. No, this book, this is your guide. This is your guide to laughing through it. Based on the whole idea that, oops, you're fucked. You missed the rapture. If you missed the rapture, this is the book that tells you how to survive during the tribulation. And I've also got, if you want to check out on Amazon, we have a coloring book that just came out too. You want to color your way through the end times? Yep. There's a coloring book for that. Well, this world is crazy that we're in. We've already seen it. We're going to see a little bit more of it. But in today's episode, we're going to be sitting down with spiritual hot sauce host Chris Jones to be talking about Jesus outside of the institution. But before we get to that, one thing I've learned lately is the world is insane. And it's easy to lose heart because there's a lot of insane people that are running it. And the only way that we can really get through this is to be able to laugh at it. So, back again, by popular demand, the choicest cuts of Christian nuts. That's right, it's time for the Christian Crazy. Here we go.
If loving the Lord is wrong, I don't want to be right.
Lord have mercy. The Lord is my shepherd. He know what I want.
Well, first up, we've got a cadre of televangelists here. Ooh, what are they talking about? Well, they're talking about who is their favorite president of all time. Who's your favorite president of all time, right? I want you guys to guess. Let's go out on a limb. Who is it going to be? You have guesses? Lock them in. Lock them in right now. Let's go ahead and see. Who are these guys? Lance Wallenow? Lance, you're full of shit. Let's hear what you got to say.
Today is President's Day, so want to wish Happy President's Day to everybody there. So I'll go around the room. I got 50 seconds. Your favorite president, Lance, go.
Well, my favorite president is the one who's under siege right now that we've helped to get elected. I believe Donald J. Trump will go down in history as being the most impacting, transformational personality to ever enter into electoral politics.
Mark?
So much ass kissing.
Favorite president?
What?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Donald Trump right now, and he has a chance to cement this legacy in the next 2.5, 3 years and absolutely go down as the most consequential president in history.
All right.
Oh, God.
Hey, I got a son born on Reagan's birthday. I had a granddaughter born on Lincoln's birthday last week, but I'm going with these guys. Donald Trump has done more
Yes,
in
all
even
right.
just the 5 years that he's had as president than even those guys did in their entire time as president. So Donald Trump wins tonight.
Without a doubt, he's.
Oh my God, the
doing
ass
something
kissing.
in
The
our
ass
lifetime.
kissing
You're
is
part
so
of history.
exhausting.
Today
Next.
is.
Well, next up, we've got Hank Kunneman. Hank Kunneman feels very passionate about something. He's going to ask his church. Something's on his heart. Hank needs something. And again, we're playing a guessing game here. What do you think it is? What do you think dear Hank needs? I'm going to let you guys figure this out.
I said,
Let's
I'm
see.
going to have Amy call. I'm going to charter a jet. Oh. Because I am so dedicated to God, and I am so dedicated to you, the people, and I am dedicated to the United States of America and to fight for it. I said, Brenda, I feel like I'm supposed to be there at all costs. I know we're paying a lot of money here, but Brenda, I am pressed. It's like, you know, where the Bible says Jesus was pressed to go to Jerusalem. I felt pressed that I have to do this. I don't need another thing to do.
Jesus did it on a private donkey.
Because I'm trying to be obedient alongside of you and with you.
Oh,
and
he's
if you
trying
know
so
me,
hard to be
there's
obedient.
no quit in me. I haven't quit. I keep pressing. So
He
I
does.
chartered
He
a
keeps
flight,
grifting.
But thank you. It's
Oh, God. It's so hard
it's
being a
very
grifter.
expensive.
It is expensive
And,
being a grifter.
Yes, I loved it. I got there and I was able to do Thursday night and then Friday morning and fly back. And I was very appreciative.
Oh, God.
Folks, we got to get a travel fund together. I went before God and I said, Lord, just give me a scripture.
This is true. He
so
went
that
before
I
God,
can
guys.
share
Remember
with
this.
the people something out of the word that is true, that I can share with them, that sometimes a minister does have to have, watch this now, a travel plan and a travel vehicle that's dependable.
That's true.
The last few times
Bicycle,
I tried
unicycle,
to make
come on.
trips,
It's dependable.
they haven't been dependable.
Oh, no.
And I almost could not get back here in time. Or
Suffering for the Lord is so difficult.
How many know the story there? But I want to show you Mark chapter 3, verse 9 out of the NIV. Notice what Jesus instructed. Or no, it's NLT, excuse me. Jesus instructed his disciples to what? Have a boat, what? So the crowd would not crush him.
Let's get him a
even
boat.
Jesus was concerned about going.
Let's get him a Jesus type of boat. Little wooden with oars. Come on, Hank.
Things. He had to have smarts because of where his ministry was
Actually,
at.
does he even need a plane with those collars? What is up with the collar on his neck? That's amazing. It's amazing. Oh, my gosh. What a joke. What a joke is Hank Kuhneman. But the grifters got to keep grifting because that's just what they do. That's what they do. And if you guys thought that was bad, it's only going to get worse because we've got the Christian cringe.
Christian cringe. No, God, please, no, no.
So be forewarned, the segment is called the Christian cringe, and you think it's going to get worse, and it gets worse, and it just keeps getting worse. And none of this really makes sense, and I need you to go through this with me. I need you to suffer with through this, because it's illogical, and it's just downright absolutely bonkers and fucking insane. So let's go ahead and listen here.
Do I believe that babies come from heaven? I do. I do. I think that there are multiple millions and billions of thoughts swarming around the head of God, and he sends infants to this planet from his thoughts. And they are born, and God has sent a cure to this planet for every known disease.
Yes.
The reason we have disease is because the wickedness of abortion aborted the answer to a disease before it was ever born. Do I believe that babies come from heaven?
Did you see what we did here? Did you see what we did here? Did you see that? Did you love it? Did you love it? That, oh, yes, God has actually sent us the cure for everything. He sent us the cure for diseases, for everything. But that cure was in a baby, and that baby was aborted. Tear. If only God would have known. If only God had providence. If only God was the God of the universe and would have known ahead of time. Because what is it? That's just, yeah. God's a terrible shot. If that's what he's trying to do. And if this logic, tease this out. The logic here is simply, well, yeah, God is a terrible shot. God just can't get it in. Oh, I keep trying to give them the answer to it. I keep trying to give them the answer to life and everything else, but nope. They just won't let it happen. Stupid humans. Well, you know who is not a stupid human? Chris Jones. So let's go ahead and hop into the conversation that I had with him. Here we go. Joining us today is Chris Jones, who is the host of the Spiritual Hot Sauce podcast. And I really feel like we're going to be digging into some interesting conversations that we're going through here today.
Yeah.
So yeah, Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Stuart, for inviting me to be here. I appreciate it. This is nice.
Yeah. Well, give us what is your podcast about? Give us your elevator speech on the pod.
You know, it's weird because I was just talking to somebody else about this earlier today, and what a unicorn I am. I don't fit in quite with anybody. So I know right now it's really popular to be in deconstruction or evolution. And when I say popular, that's probably not the right word to use there, but it's, there's a lot of people in that process. I think it's estimated 40 million since the late 90s. But, I'm coming from the other side. Although I grew up in evangelical Christianity, I took a walk out in the world. And I typically, what I do is I look through universal truth's lens, and then I look at the scripture and I get a totally different read on things than probably most people. And the podcast does a whole lot separating Jesus from religion that's built around him. So that's a big part of what I do, because I think there's the religion that worships the deity of Christ, and what we focus on is discipleship of Christ. Two different things. You can be one and not be the other.
Absolutely. Well, what's the difference? Tell me
So
tease those out. How does it look?
Man, okay. That's an excellent question. As a believer, you can look at Jesus, and I just did an episode on this. You can look at Jesus as God, as the Godhead, and the one you go to get forgiveness for your sins. And I call it, we talk a lot about becoming the antidote to the poison in humanity. And it happens that by Jesus's attributes of the fruit that he bears, that if we do it correctly, we become the antidote to the poison. However, if you approach him through religion as a worshiper of the deity of Christ, you can take the antidote to the poison and you can pedestal it, and you can worship Jesus and thanks to him for this antidote, but yet never take the antidote to the poison, because you get wrapped up in indoctrination in the religion of. To become a disciple of Christ means that you actually do what he asked, and we become like him, and not necessarily religious. I think a good religion should serve you and having a better life. Becoming a disciple of Christ, though, means that you serve others, and then you heal others, and you become the Good Samaritan when you're given opportunity and people that's in your path, and what that looks like, and dying to self. So I hope I didn't get too out there.
No, I love you. I love you teasing that out, because I think it's really important to be able to see where those roads lead you. And how you embrace that. And it will definitely change how folks hold on to how they see Christ, how they see scripture, how they see all of these things. It'll really change the culture.
I just did an episode, and my last episode was about someone who did this. And it was, what if you could read the scriptures without being influenced by religion or a culture that's religiously influenced, without the church, and you just read it? How would we read it? And there was someone who did that. And he, in his words, said that when I read the Old Testament, it was painfully boring. It was boring. He said, but when I got to the New Testament, he said, when I started reading Jesus's writings, in them was life. And he said, Jesus is one of the greatest teachers in all humanity. However, and he was convinced, because what he did is, when he was in college, he was this would have been back in the late 1800s. But when he was in college, he was afforded to go to England, London, England, and study law. And when he was there, he challenged himself. He had a Hindu background. And this would have been back when British rule was in play. But he hadn't been subjected any to Christianity. And he said the only thing that he knew is he did not like the missionaries, because they made fun of him because of his faith. And this guy, if you know anything about the caste system, he wasn't one of the upper echelons. He was just a reg like me, and he was afforded this opportunity. So he got to go study law. But when he was there, he decided he was going to take everyone's religion, everyone's philosophy, the ideologies, and he was, whatever book you had, he was going to read it from front cover to back cover and challenge himself and allow you to try to convert him. And even with atheism. And although he went through a lot of things, and he said he found a lot of value in them, nothing was transformative until he read the Bible, and it was Jesus's writings. But he was convinced that he was going to become a Christian until he went to talk to the Christians. And he actually says, because he journaled all this, and said, I would be a Christian if it wasn't for the Christians. I don't like the church, but I love their Jesus. And he actually spent the rest of his life as a quote from him, in one lung was the Bhagavad Gita, and the other lung was the teachings of Jesus. And he's seen himself as a disciple in this commandment of love. And he left church where he found it, but he took Jesus and the Bible with him, and he went on to change the world. So, yeah, there's a teaser in you but it also gives you an idea of the kind of stuff we talk about.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love you being able to bring this out. And you mentioned earlier that you do come from a lineage, at least I think it was before we're on the air. You do come from pastorly
I do.
background?
So I was expected I was going to be a pastor. So yeah, I grew up. My grandfather was a pastor. My father was a pastor. Everybody in our family was in the ministry. I remember the first time I spoke in church as preaching, I was probably 11, 12, and it was a huge crowd, and I was scared to death. But, you know, everyone just thought, you know, Chris is going to go on and become somebody to change the world. And I went a different direction. So I went into, you know, leadership. That's my background. I'm still in that.
Yeah, but so Chris, what led you down the slippery slope?
Oh
You were
gosh.
ordained to go into ministry, brother.
I was.
I know you were
I was
taken.
supposed to be the man. That's right. Chris is going to. You know what? I remember. If you want to know the truth, I tell everybody. If you really want to know what happens, you know, this is a good way to introduce. I use this metaphor called the compass, and it's how we go through life, and it's scripturally based and also archetypal based. But it says that how you deal with suffering, because it's in suffering is typically where you find spirituality. I mean, that's kind of what happens. But I say north and south is suffering and things that we can control. North being your emotions, your wants, your needs, your desires, your fears, everything that's emotional to your physical body, that's north. And the polar opposite of that is south. There's a Greek word from the Bible called, or not just from the Bible, but it's used often in the Bible, cardia, your heart, your center, your essence. And we confuse heart and emotions. They're not the same thing in the original Greek. They're two different things. And Jesus often, when he says in your heart, the Greek says your cardia, your center, your essence, it means your will. So your north and your south are constantly battling one another for control of you. That's what it is. It's your emotions pitted against your will. And we are in this struggle, and we are, and through that though, I mean, but isn't that the universe? Isn't that what energy hits energy? And through that sparks and life comes out of that. I mean, it's kind of what it is, but in that constant fight, in that battle, we have to learn how to negotiate that, because that's suffering that we can control. I mean, if we, through our goodwill, you know, every day I can get up and say, hey, you know what? I want a dozen donuts today. And my physical man's going to say, let's do that. 12 dozen donuts, right? And 2 cups of coffee. So, you know, that's immediate gratification. That's what emotions want. Emotions, north, doesn't understand investment of behaviors long term. So you have to use your will, and you're constantly in fight. But these are things you can control. You can circumvent suffering by choosing better from your will. But then there's suffering and things that we can't control. And I'm talking about the big, bad suffering that changes your identity, where the path ends, the road is done. It's almost hero's journey, archetypal, but it's when everything that you believed was going to be isn't going to be, where everything stops. And I say this is east and west. This is suffering and things you can't control. But east is suffering in that kind of adversity, but it has a purpose. There's a term called post-traumatic growth, and it says that you can go through that kind of suffering that is that traumatic, and you can come out the other side. You'll be changed. You won't be the same. Everything that you knew about yourself will be gone, but you will be better. You will be more evolved, and you will be in a better place. It may not be the place you wanted to be, but it might be the place you need to be. So we say that east has purpose. It's the spiritual part of it. West means it's this kind of suffering, but it has no purpose. You use science, you use wisdom, and you just navigate through it. So this is the compass of what we say of how we navigate life in suffering. And right in the center is where the commandment of Christ goes, you know, that rules everything, that all the choices and decisions and how you move forward is John 13, 34 and 35, you know, love one another as I've loved you. By this, the world will know you're my disciple, not a believer or follower, but a disciple. You know, I don't think Jesus came to start a religion. I think he came to make disciples and bring us the antidote to the poison. That's my fundamental belief. But I went through a period where that happened to me, where everything was going fantastic and my life was set. I was an award-winning leader for Forbes Fortune 500 companies, $100 billion a year company a year. I'm one of their leaders. I'm expected to go on and help lead the next wave of the incarnation of the company. And then tragedy hits, and everything in my life that I knew and everything that I believed was going to be stopped. And my identity was just shut down. Everything, and it didn't matter what I did after that. No matter, and I mean, I have a lot of tenacity. So, and I have a lot of arrogance and pride, so I was like, no, I'll get through this. So I just kept, no, I got this. So I just tried to, but it didn't matter. It was like, punching water. You're not getting anywhere. And my life just kind of hit the side of a mountain. And it was almost divine, but it was, I had some moments in there that I will never say was God, but it was God, and but I won't say God told me to tell you this or anything like that. However, there was some moments I had in my suffering. I talk about a lot the hero's journey, and that Jesus is the archetype, and I'm going to go out and this was my experience. Jesus said to his disciples, deny yourself, pick up your cross and follow me, that whosoever loses their life for my sake shall find it. My whole life, I thought that was weird. That's just a weird thing to say. And there's a lot of religious turns and phrases on there. But after I went through this, and after I started studying archetypal knowledge, and that we lack the wisdom, quite frankly, to what we do with that knowledge, but it's intrinsically in all of us. I started studying this, and I started applying that again from this truth's lens, the universal truth's lens of what Jesus was saying. And I started realizing, if you've ever studied the hero's journey, I was like, well, Jesus is definitely the hero in the hero's journey. But of all the characters that I've ever seen, and this goes back 4,600 years, some of our very first writings is about that story, and we're still writing about it today. George Lucas famously said that if it hadn't been for Joseph Campbell and the hero with 1,000 faces, Star Wars wouldn't have gotten written. It was about the hero's journey. But I realized that Jesus is the only one that came out of that kind of story and said, now you do it, because in this is life. And there's 5 life cycle stages. And this is what happened to me. And this is how I kind of seen it from what I studied and what I had just talked about in that scripture that Jesus gave us about denying yourself. And Jesus is talking about the crucifixion. He's talking about the death of himself and then being reborn into something different, because that's what happens to him. So, and this is what I went through. But he says that when you're going through a great amount of trauma, like I was talking about, this is east, where the path runs out, there's nowhere to go, and it may not be what you want. Jesus says, do what I do, right? And the first thing Jesus did was go to the Garden of Gethsemane. That was his first thing. And what did he do in the Garden of Gethsemane? He prayed, God, I don't want to do this. Take this from me, sweat blood. So in my mind, I'm imagining that any way that you can verbalize it, any way you can say it, anything that you can, how you can say it, get me out of this, I don't want this, he did. But when he knew that it wasn't going to change, he said, your will be done. And then from the garden, he goes to the cross. And this represented, like for me, I did not want to go through, and I didn't want my path to change. So I had to go by myself to the Garden of Gethsemane and have a moment with God. And that's kind of a good way to describe it. Because even with Jesus, when he went to the Garden of Gethsemane, his disciples they didn't stay awake. They fell asleep because he had to go alone. Because that represents that you can have a great support team, but when you have this moment, you need to do this alone. So I finally just gave up in my Garden of Gethsemane and said, okay, your will be done, which takes you to the cross. And the cross is your will of everything that you thought you were going to have. It's everything that you want. It's your pride. It's your ego. It's the path and the journey that you believed was yours and your identity. And you have to die to all of that to take his will. But through this, now the stress and the adversity that I was experiencing didn't stop. It continued to go, and that takes you into what Joseph Campbell calls the cave. So Jesus goes to the tomb. And it's in the tomb that his circumstances doesn't change, but his circumstances are changing him. Because if you, and this is the longest part of the process, it's in the tomb where Jesus is being transformed, but it takes the longest part. It's 3 days. But when he comes out, kind of like the cocoon or the butterfly, he comes out, he is not restored, he is transformed. And he will never go back to the identity he had before. Jesus will never, at that time when he witnesses for 40 days, which is the fifth part, he doesn't heal anybody. He doesn't feed the multitudes. He doesn't cast out demons. He doesn't do any of those things. Jesus does one thing. He shows his scars and he allows them to speak. I call them divine scars, or scars that speak. And they'll speak in ways his words can't, like with Thomas. So Thomas will want to touch the scars, but that's what speaks to Thomas is the scars. So Jesus witnesses, and the last thing he tells them is go and make more disciples. So it's the 5 life cycle stages, which is symbolic. And he tells his disciples, pick up your cross, deny yourself, pick up your cross and follow me. Whosoever loses their life for my sake will find it. So in this, I found it, but it wasn't the identity I had before I went into it, of who I was and what I was supposed to be. But it's the identity, I guess, that I was supposed to be. And when I came out, I wasn't the same person, and I had to go through a long process. My cave was not 3 days. My cave was a lot longer.
Yeah.
But it was my pride. It was my ego. It was everything that gets in the way that gets you to a better place. And it was just a slow process. And it was just a weird, unique place, most beautiful place I've ever been in or through. But it's very painful at times. Yeah. It's felt like my pride just being broke, but it was a very nurturing way. And I don't try to get all spiritually weird, and that's not what I'm trying to do. But it was spiritual, and how I would describe it for me. But anyway, it talks about the life 5 cycle stages that Jesus demonstrated for us and that I went through. And that changed the direction of my life. I learned about grace. I was given I felt like I started understanding this word grace in what we do. And if I could bring that up, I guess I need to talk about it. I wasn't even sure how much of it. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and I'll just share it with you. But
please do.
It was 2006, December 13th. I had an employee fall and die. And I watched the employee die. It was horrific. And that changed the rest of my life. The company gave me a written commendation for it because how I handled it and everything I did. And that night, I went home and I was alone. It was a dark room. And I just dug out my Bible. I hadn't looked at my Bible for years, but it was the same one I had when I was a kid. I don't know, when I was a kid, I want the biggest honking Bible I got. So that's what I got. It was a big, meaty Bible. But, it's one of those moments of desperation. So I clenched the Bible and I say, God, just please help. And I opened the Bible and I just looked down and it's 2 Corinthians 12:9. My grace is sufficient for thee. My strength is made perfect in weakness. It's King James. And I said, yeah, nope. I'm not your guy. I don't think so. I was wanting something about comforting and feeling better and getting me through this. And that's not what happened. But I didn't want to pursue it either. So I walked away from my Garden of Gethsemane. I just said no. And I literally said, I'll do it myself. I was a prideful person at that time, arrogant. I usually get done what I wanted to get done. So I just went back and just started trying to go through it. And I had some success, but the further I went, the worse it got. And I just kept running and out of steam and things kept falling and falling and falling, got worse and worse and worse until my life just collapsed. And it was like my life hit the side of a mountain. And long story short, I ended up in an apartment going through a 3rd divorce. My life was just a disaster. And I moved and got to this apartment, and in the last kind of a ditch effort, I remember waking up on a Sunday morning and I said, okay, God, I'm back. Let's just do this. So I prayed the same way. I clenched, the Bible, looked up, God help. And I just opened the Bible, and I promise you, I'm looking at 2 Corinthians 12:9 again. So I was like, yeah, I'm done. So I started to shed it again, and I was like, no, you need to read this. So I just kept reading it. But as I read it and I started understanding it, I started studying, I started reading it more and more, and I started challenging myself. Well, hold on now. What's grace, Chris? It says, my strength is made perfect in weakness. Well, what's weakness? It's a demonstration of lack of strength. You've got to try, And then I was reading what Paul was talking about, and I was like, this makes perfect sense, because Paul is saying, you know what, God, this ain't working out. I got this thorn in my flesh. You told me to come spread this word, and you told me to do this. And, we always think of, I'm going to do things. He must have thought that I'm going to be like an avenger, because I always look at it like, Paul, I want you to go down to the riverside. I want you to pick up those rocks, and I want you to start throwing them across the river. And Paul's like, no one can do that. Yeah. So I'm going to do this. So he goes and gets the rock and starts throwing it. And, you can see it in Paul's writings. Initially, he's very confident. He's very gung-ho, and he gets humbled. The longer the writing goes on with Paul, the books that's older, he's more and more humble. And I think you can hear it in 2 Corinthians 12:9, because he's saying, basically, I keep throwing these rocks, God, but they're not going across the river. I keep seeing these things splash in the water, and he's very distressed. I got this thing he calls a thorny side, whatever that was, but he's a little frustrated. But then God says, my grace is sufficient for thee. My strength is made perfect in weakness. And what he was saying is, listen, Paul, I didn't tell you to go throw the rocks across the river. I told you to go and give the effort. I'll deliver the results. The results are mine, not yours. I'm just asking for you to be obedient to what I told you. And that's when Paul gets excited and starts, praising. So I was like, okay. And I had some other things, and I started studying and reading, and it took me down this whole path. And then the verse in Ephesians that gets us off the hook, we're saved by grace, through faith, not by works. And I was like, wait a second, this is the same guy that wrote the other one. And this is after he wrote 2 Corinthians 12:9. And I was like, well, what's faith? Hebrews 11:1. What's that say? It says that, it's not believe. Believe's an opinion of. Just that's all it is. It's an opinion of. But faith is the action that supports our convictions of what we hold to be true, even though we have not yet seen the evidence. In other words, throw the rock, do what you were told. So I was looking at Ephesians when he says we're saved by grace, not through faith, not by works. And I was like, that makes perfect sense. That goes back to what he was saying, throw the rock. So it's not you doing it. There's nothing you can ever do to throw that rock across there. But to take it as a way out to go sit and wait for God to show up and throw the rock for you, or Jesus has got it, And then I started realizing is because if you read on, he says, but we are designed for these good works in Christ Jesus. And these good works are basically predetermined. You're going to have these opportunities. And so I took that as my first thing I got from God. And that's anytime I seen anybody, because my whole personality, like everything I'm telling you about myself and where I came from and leadership, I'm the type of person at that time, no longer, but if you had a broken leg and I was thirsty, I'd say, hey, go get me a glass of water, will you? I'd expect you to get up and do that. And I started realizing that, I got to serve others. I got to become the antidote to the poisonous commandment of Christ. And so I started, calling it throw the rock. So anytime I seen somebody that had a need, I'd say, I got to throw the rock. I just got to do it. Whatever happens, that's not on me. If it happens and it's wonderful and I see things, and I had a front row seat and I got to see some awesome things. But listen, if it misses and it hits the water, it's not my fault. It's not mine. That's God's. I'm just told to throw the rock and be obedient. So I'm just being obedient. So I got to see some really cool things. Well, I met a woman, and it was one of those situations. I couldn't tell if she was angry or she was just confused and a little overwhelmed. So I was like, okay, what? So, but it turns out she was overwhelmed and confused, and I ended up helping her. She was a widow, and I had that that James, chapter 1, verse 26 or 27 about, if you don't take care of the widows and the orphans, your religion is in vain. So, all right, what do you need? So I started taking care of some stuff around the house. She was recently widowed. And this was back in early pandemic stuff. And I was just trying to help her. But I was doing that. I found out she was a person of faith. And I just started trying to encourage her because I'd been deep, reading. Again, not your religious type. That's not me. I'm definitely archetypal, other, I'll talk to you about the Bhagavad Gita too, and so I started helping her and encouraging her. And she goes, would you care to come and do a Bible study here? Okay. Yep. So I did a Bible study there. And she asked me to come back a week later, and I did. And just more and more people started showing up. So it ended up being this Bible study that went on, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I had the pastor. I started going to this church, Daylight Church. I actually had H.L. Hussman on the show, Unlearning Religion. Different guy, great guy. But he came, and then he heard me speak, and then he said, hey, why don't you take the pulpit? I was like, well, I'm not a preacher. I'm not pastoral, nor do I want to be. I just encourage. I'm just trying to help other people. And so I just started speaking. And I still speak. And I've spoken to multiple churches and encouraged. And that led to doing a podcast, sharing these different ideas and concepts that I have gained through going through all the things that I have. And here I am on Snarky Faith.
Of all places.
But I don't have, what is it? I don't trust me because I don't have great hair and I don't have I have decent stage presence. I just started, and I got in, and I've been getting into some weird things. I wouldn't say weird things, but different. It's definitely off the beaten path. And that's where I get a whole lot into this, and I talk about becoming the antidote to the poison a lot, and people look at me like I've got, 3 heads, so I'll just go through that and explain it. But there's this, we're all familiar with it. It's the Good Samaritan. I mean, my goodness, we've been hearing this our whole life, right? But I dug into that because it gives us 3 things and we're not sure what we do with it. And it's a lawyer that comes and asks him, how do I inherit eternal life? And Jesus asks him, how do you read it? He knows he's a lawyer. And he quotes Leviticus 19:18, love thy neighbor as thyself. Jesus says, you're correct. Do this and you'll live. And he says, yeah, but define it. Who's my neighbor? So I don't know what he really means by it. I've heard a lot of different things. I assume that he's probably won't know in geographical location and proximity to where I live. Who's my neighbor? Is it in my down at the end of the street? Is it in my block? Is it at the end of the city even? Or when does it become that you're a stranger? And Jesus just goes into the parable of the Good Samaritan, and he just says this. There was this man traveling from the road to Jericho to Jerusalem. And these robbers jumped on him and beat him. They beat him pretty bad, left him dying on the side of the road, basically stripped him of his clothes. Clothes were valuable back then, and took everything. And they took off. And then comes a Levite priest. It says a priest, but it had to be a Levite in that social construct in that religion. But he saw the man, but he doesn't stop. And then it says a Levite. He's seen the man, but he didn't stop. Which is a weird thing because you have to understand that their religion was their social construct. So it said, if the guy that's beaten on the side of the road was okay, and let's say he got a speeding ticket, he would have to go to the temple and pay a tithe to get forgiven. It's the guys that he has to go to for God to get forgiveness that's walking past him. But it says a Samaritan who had been beneath everyone in that scenario, he sees the man, has compassion, and takes care of him and takes him to an inn and tells the innkeeper, I'll pay the bill, you take care of them. I got to go, but I'll be back and I'll take care of the bill. And then Jesus says, from the perspective of the guy on the side of the road dying, who's his neighbor? And he says, the one that did good. He goes, you're right. Now do this and you'll live. So, I mean, this is very complex. This is speaking about the social construct. He's talking about a lawyer, and it tells how we define good, wrong. And it goes back to the tree of knowledge of good and evil, that from a tree of knowledge of good of evil, a serpent would give us a fruit that would become the poison to humanity. And it was the serpent's venom that is the reason why we took it. So anytime you see in any higher writings and philosophy, fruit, it means attributes. So that's what it's talking about. It's the fruits. It's the attributes of how we define good and evil. And it was from that brought us the poison to humanity. And then from a tree, Jesus would bring us a fruit. This is the antidote to the poison. And he's speaking about that here, about the Good Samaritan, because this is what it is. The robbers represent selfishness, and they're not obeying the law of the social construct.
Yeah.
They're doing what they want. They're living for themselves. They don't care about anybody else. They're very self-centric. They don't care. Now, the Levite and the Levite priest, they're obeying the laws of the social construct. They would never steal from the man. They would never beat the man. They would never do anything to hurt the man. But they're not doing anything to help him either. They're staying in their lane. They're just fulfilling their roles in the social construct. They're playing their personas. You know, we all play personas in the social construct, and that's what Jesus is kind of showing them. There's a difference in your true self of who you are, how you choose. You should always choose humanity rather than just the roles you play. See, they're not breaking the law, but they're defining good like we define good. And defining good is not hurting other people. And Jesus says that's not good. What good is what the Samaritan did. He came out of his own persona because he had somewhere to go to as well. And he gave of his own to help somebody else. In other words, he chose humanity over the social construct. He wasn't breaking the laws, but he was choosing above it. He was doing more than what was required. But that's how we typically define good and evil. We define good as not hurting other people, and that's what Jesus was showing. It's not two things. It's not either or. It's three things. You've got two. You've got doing bad, and then you got not doing bad. But doing good is something else completely. And if you'll obey the law of Leviticus 19:18 of love thy neighbor as thyself, that it's not about geographical location and proximity of where you live, but where you are to where somebody's hurt and has need. You'll take care of it. So that started changing how I perceived Jesus and what he was doing, because not only, we always want to make it about the afterlife and heaven, and I'm not saying we're not or nothing like that, but all I'm saying is that teaching that I just gave you, of what I just showed you, that if Jesus was nothing more than a culmination of our best ideas from thousands of years of how we heal humanity, or Jesus was just this brilliant thinker that had this epiphany that understood something that was so changing for us, that how we defined evil, because going back to Eve, that's what it was. That is the poison in humanity that he was showing, that it's the fruit, the attribute of how we define good and evil. And it's the serpent's venom, which is, what did he say to Eve? You'll be like God. So putting your throne above and choosing to only look at yourself and just obey the social construct, the laws of your land, is not doing good. That's, you're just obeying the social construct. And Jesus was saying, if you'll take the fruit, my commandment, to love one another as I have loved you, by this the world will know you're my disciple. If you all will do that, we always hear, though you are in the world, don't be of it. Another way to say it is, though you are in the social construct, don't be defined by it. Paul said the same thing. Paul says, let the thief steal no more, but go to work with these hands. We stop at going to work with our hands. But he says, for the reason of, you can help others when they have need. So it's not just about obeying the laws of the land, and it's about helping humanity above everything else. When Paul talks about in Galatians, he's talking about the fruits of the Spirit. These are the attributes of when you take that commandment of Christ into your cardia, your center, your essence, your will, how you choose. He says that love, joy, peace, patience, gentleness, kindness, faithfulness, meekness, self-control. He says something interesting. He says, against such, there is no law. In other words, the commandment of Christ isn't about creating a social construct. It fits into any social construct. And against, there is no law, that you can change humanity from where you're at. See, the robbers represent a dystopian society. That means you don't need laws. We all do what we want. Justice is exacted in how we see fit. But we work that out, and we end up becoming law, a nation of laws, a society, a social construct, which is where we get our language. It all started with pictographs. It was just, in Mesopotamia, was it? I'm sidetracking here. I'm sorry.
You're fine.
Cheese, goats, beer,
Yeah.
But it is so important that it developed a written language.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't realize, or we think that we can come up with the perfect laws. And if we can come up with the perfect social construct, which means more laws and more input, that we can get closer to a utopian society. But I think what Jesus was showing was, no, it doesn't work like that. You have to antiquate the laws in order to get to that place.
Mm-hmm.
And if you'll get to that place in that way, then you'll change the world. I mean, what is it right now? There's 1 in 4 people that claim to be a Christian or believe in Jesus. That if we would get out of the religion of just the worship of the deity of Christ, that when we go to worship and we go to church and we come together in community and we're there because we're afraid of what happens to us if we're not there, the whole other subject. But rather than just, I don't want to say give it up, but just coming together in the worship of the deity of Christ and becoming more religious, we start to become more of a disciple. Yeah. Like the guy I was telling you about in India who went on to change the world. He rejected the religion of, there's 2 major things. He says, so if I give my sins to Jesus, then I can use Jesus as an excuse of why I don't have to change.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I'm not about that. I think that what Jesus is teaching is transformative. Yeah. I want to be like Jesus. I want to become that because I want to change the world around me. So I reject what you're saying in that. And the other thing is, he didn't see Jesus as the only Son of God. He said, I don't believe he's the only. We're all children of God. Mm-hmm. And we all can do what he did through love by his commandment. Absolutely. So therefore, I reject the church, because he wanted to join the church, but he said, I can't because, I want to be a disciple. I don't want to be religious. Mm-hmm. And so what's strange is he went back to being a Hindu and spent the rest of his life as a Hindu, but he was a disciple of Christ. That was above everything, that commandment of Christ. And he would teach the Sermon on the Mount. He'd have a bunch of Hindu people around him or different cultures. And this Hindu would teach Sermon on the Mount about how beautiful it was and how brilliant, and that it wasn't there for us to hear that Jesus was doing it for us, that we are going to do this. Yeah. So that's kind of what everything is about for me. Mm-hmm. And I totally agree with that. And like I said, a good religion should serve you. Anytime the religion has you serving it, it's just made a mountain to God. And that's a problem. That if God wanted us to pursue him like that up the mountain, he would make himself accessible in that way. But he didn't, and Jesus's commandment lets us know what God wants from us. And that is, go take care of one another. Go. Yes. If you'll go to the hurting people that has need, if you'll do that, you're making me happy. That's where you find me at. That's where you find the nature of God. Isn't that what Jesus said? Will show us God. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. He's not talking about physically. He's talking about his nature. 10:38 says Jesus went about doing good.
Thank you so much, Chris, today for being here and being part of this and giving us a snapshot into what it looks like to be part of the Spiritual Hot Sauce with Chris Jones. So, Chris Jones, thank you so much for being a part of the show.
It's been great. If anybody wants to find out more about me, Spiritual Hot Sauce, the podcast, you can get me on Spotify, Apple Podcast. You can connect with me on Facebook, Spiritual Hot Sauce Podcast with Chris Jones. You can email me at spiritualhotsauce@gmail.com. And I hope everybody comes out and checks out some of this stuff. So anyway, thank you so much, Stuart.
Thank you so much, Chris.
The end times are upon us. The signs are happening. The end is near, but don't panic. You may have missed the rapture, but there's still time to prepare for what comes next. Disasters, plagues, celestial malfunctions. Consider them friendly reminders. Now's the time to prepare. From homemade hazmat suits to heavenly currency and trustworthy prophets, this guide has you covered. Because when the heavens open and the world melts, belief alone won't save you. The Tribulation Survival Guide. How to stay alive when everything else is dead. Available now.